Welcome to We Politics. Today's guest is Tom Hensel. He's running for mayor. Tom Hensel is an entrepreneur. He's a graduate of York University Law School, Osgoode Hall Law School. He's volunteered with Habitat for Humanity. He's also volunteered with Assisted Living, Southwestern Ontario. And before getting his law degree as a mature student, he had a career in publishing and insurance. Tom, welcome today.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Why do you want to be mayor?
Well, you know, I've been involved in politics since I was a teenager on other campaigns, and so I've had exposure to how elections work and how candidates campaign. And when it came to this election in particular, I was really dissatisfied with a lot of the decisions that have been coming out of City Hall over the past 4 years. And I decided that, rather than just stay in the armchair and talk about it, let's do something. And I put my hand up and decided that I was going to make a go of it and try and get some issues out there and rally the troops to see if we can make some changes at City Hall this time around.
Well, as soon as you put your name in, the Windsor Star was bombarded with complaints about you.
Yes,
you're aware of that,
of course,
right? Like
yeah.
This article here, mayoral candidate Thomas Hensel has a trail of evictions, owed money, records show. Word that Thomas Hensel is running for mayor has prompted a flurry of warnings from people who claim to be his financial victims.
Yeah.
Now, quite frankly, I'm surprised that you even showed up today because of these things. This would kill anybody's mayoral candidacy. Why are you still pressing ahead, and how do you account for these allegations?
Well, I've defended the allegations to some extent in social media. I've made some statements regarding some of the situation that unfolded with regard to the individuals that have come together. It seems to me like it was motivated by a single individual who decided to sort of do a little bit of fishing to see if they could find people with derogatory statements or information. And fair enough. I mean, this is politics. I mean, people can say whatever they want.
It's a blood sport.
It is, and I'm not one to roll over when it comes to the fight. I've been running a campaign, and I'm motivated, to put forward the agenda that we're working for at City Hall, and we're going to stick it through. It's unfortunate that, these individuals decided to use the media to put forward what essentially seem to me to be personal beefs or claims that they think they have. Those kinds of questions, I think, when you start putting them out into the public forum during a political campaign, and you become a bit of a personal target for whatever issues you may have with previous business partners or colleagues, or for that matter, mistakes that you've made in the past that you've been accountable for and that you've since dealt with.
But how truthful are these? Are these all lies? I haven't heard that you filed any libel and slander suits.
During the political campaign, my position is that we'll consider those options after the election, and I've made statements to other journalists who've asked me these questions. I don't think it's appropriate to engage in that kind of strategy at this point where we're looking at filing slander and libel suits. I think the more appropriate approach would be to deal with the journalistic integrity aspect of it. We'll contact Post Media and see if we can provide them with enough information to perhaps get a retraction at some point. But my campaign isn't being stalled by this. We're moving forward regardless of what the Star has printed or what people have said or brought forward as allegations or personal beefs. And the response from a legal point of view will come after the election. We don't want it to interfere with our message and what I'm trying to do with regard to our platform.
Well, that's true, but how can the voters trust you with all these allegations out there? The one that struck me the most was the Law Society of Upper Canada, revoking your whatever you had as an articling student, whatever credibility you had, that was lost when they revoked your credentials.
Well, let's get into that a little bit. I mean, it's essentially, I was a law student 20 years ago. I graduated in 1998, and of course, you know, after you graduate from law school, you have to go through the process of articling or apprenticing with a supervising lawyer. And unfortunately, there were two of us, both articling students with the same principal. His name was Douglas Miller, and
no relation to me.
No relation to you, Rob. But Doug got into some serious issues with the Law Society himself. He ended up being suspended from practice while he was overseas in China. And so the two of us, the law students that were being supervised by him, were sort of in the dark when it came to his situation with his credentials with the Law Society. And as a result, we both ended up essentially practicing without supervision. And that triggered a hearing with the Law Society. And Mr. Miller never returned. So the firm that we had organized with him essentially ceased to function. We couldn't provide the services without him as a principal. And that led to a Law Society disciplinary hearing, and I actually didn't defend myself at that point. There was a 3-year period where we were doing a lot of legal work, trying to cooperate with the Law Society and find files that they needed, but we really didn't have control over that, as Mr. Miller was the principal.
So do you pretend to be a lawyer now? Like, that was one of the allegations, that people said you put yourself out as a lawyer.
Well, no. I mean, the actual allegation was that we were providing the services of a barrister and solicitor as a lawyer without having a law license, because we were still students.
Right.
And because we were unsupervised at that point, our articles couldn't have been, they weren't valid because the principal wasn't even in the country.
So you've never been called to the bar?
No. I've written the bar exams, but at the end of that process, with Mr. Miller being absent from the picture, the Law Society had really no choice. I mean, they had to conduct an investigation, and they had a hearing, and all three of us were ultimately disciplined, Mr. Miller as well.
Okay, obviously we're not going to get to the bottom of this today.
Yeah, right, but like I say, it's 20 years ago while I was a law student, I paid a very high personal price going through that, since then I've stayed away from law. I've gone into publishing and started my own businesses. I haven't helped myself out as a lawyer. I do have a law degree from Osgoode Hall, but I don't practice. And the experience was, quite frankly, one that I'm not willing to repeat in my life. But you make mistakes sometimes when you're younger, and you pay the price for that, and you move on.
But more recently, these allegations about you stiffing your landlords and personal loans that you didn't repay, these kinds of things.
Well, we can go line by line, if you want to go through the allegations.
Well, I don't want to take up the whole
but essentially,
interview with it, but I think the voters deserve to know that you're a legit candidate.
Of course. So, when you're renting, sometimes you have a dispute with a landlord and you end up going to a tribunal hearing, whether it's issues regarding to maintenance or repairs or what have you. And in both instances, that was the case. In the first instance, Mr. Ludovicius was a landlord, and I was renting an apartment from him. He had actually evicted my next-door neighbor. They were an elderly couple in their 90s, failing health, and he tried to get them out of the apartment under the auspices of renting it out to one of his relatives, his daughter. And that turned out not to be true. And I testified at a landlord and tenant tribunal hearing on behalf of those tenants. And as a result, he, I think, has a bit of a grudge, let's say. After I moved out of his unit, I rented a house that had been developed by a group called Windsor Homes. And they're in the business of restoring and refurbishing houses. Signed a lease with them, moved in, and 2 months later they decided that they were going to sell the property. And the new landlord that was quoted in the Windsor Star was not prepared to uphold the terms of the rental agreement that I had signed with that company when I first leased the premises. And that led to a dispute. We ultimately resolved that through mediation at the Landlord and Tenant Tribunal, which they obviously didn't mention. You know, they call it an eviction, but I mean the process that you go through at the Landlord and Tenant Tribunal can have several different methods of resolution, and the one that we chose was mediation at that point.
Okay, in fairness, we've only got a few minutes
Sure.
left now that we've dealt with your credibility problem, I'd say. What do you see as the priorities for the mayor of this city?
Well, I think there are three priorities that I'm focused on. The first is appointing an independent auditor general for the city of Windsor.
Now, everybody's saying that.
Well, not everyone, but a lot of voices are.
Except the current mayor,
Right,
because he says Price Waterhouse is our auditor. What's the difference in your mind?
Well, with all due respect to the mayor, I think, if I understand correctly, his position is that there's a value for money approach here, and he feels that Price Waterhouse Cooper is providing a more economical service to accomplish the same objective. But I disagree with that. I think over the long term, we're better served when it comes to value for money if we have an independent office that is in place that can look at not just line by line audits, but participate in council decisions and deliberations where there are questions about budget spending and planning for certain expenditures that require more public input. And it also provides an avenue for the public to address their concerns independently without having to deal with
what are
council.
your other two priorities?
The other two priorities are dealing with poverty. 1 in 4 children in our city is living below the poverty line. It's not just children.
What are you going to do about it if you become mayor?
I want to appoint an independent poverty task force that brings together a number of different agencies from the social services sector, policing, community housing, and mental health workers and healthcare to come together and take a look at an approach where we can actually get help that will help lift people up a little bit while they're going through that process and dealing with issues like homelessness and addiction and so on.
And quickly to the last one.
The final plank in the platform that I'm focusing on is the idea that we need to take a more fundamental approach to what we're doing with our priorities when it comes to infrastructure. We need to repair our roads and sidewalks first before we start looking at other projects. We need to make a significant investment in sewers and drainage issues when it comes to our flooding here, which has been a persistent problem over the past few years. And those investments, I think, need to really take priority before we look at other projects like widening EC Row or whatever is being put on the table with regard to other candidates as they're expressing their ideas out there.
Okay, we're out of time. Thank you, Tom Hensel.
Thank you very much.
And good luck with your campaign.
Thank you.
And join us again. That's the end of this interview. Join us again next time for We Politics with the mayoral candidates.